Major chess tournament started in Netherlands on January 18, 2025. 14 grandmasters participate, including 5 from India, including current world champion Gukesh Damaraju. USA is represented by its strongest player in the last 10 years, Fabiano Caruana, who has the highest rating in the tournament of 2803. Other famous players are Anish Giri from Netherlands and the best GM from Uzbekistan, Nodirbek Abdusador. 7 games were played in the first round, 4 draws, and 3 were decided. And all 3 were very interesting. Let's take a look at them. The first game I want to take a look at is Leon Mendonca, which is an Indian player, and as we know, Indian players are very strong these days, playing against Vincent Keimer. And you can see his rating is 2733. He's the best German player, very famous on YouTube, actually playing Title Tuesday all the time. And I think he's streaming his games also. So let's take a look at this game, which was very interesting and I would say even unusual. Indian Grandmaster started with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6. Very basic opening. Bishop c4, and here black have 2 choices usually. Bishop c5, which leads to Italian game, and knight f6, which is the 2 knights opening. And Keimer goes for knight f6, which is 2 knights defense. And here the next move, I was really surprised because Indian Grandmaster played knight g5. This is something that I played a lot when I was a child, actually. And this type of opening is played for like 100 years, but rarely on grandmaster level. So we have an attack on pawn on f7. Obviously, it has to be protected, and the best move for black in this to protect this pawn. He takes d5, knight a5, it's all theory, bishop b5 check, c6, d takes c, b takes c. The bishop is under attack here, the bishop has to go back, and the Indian player goes to d3, which is kind of unusual spot for a bishop, because you see the d point cannot move and the bishop really has trouble, the other bishop getting into the game. But there is some sense to this move, and we'll understand it later. Knight d5, the knight goes into an open active position in the middle of the board, and the knight is under attack on the square g5, so that knight has to be protected, and it just goes back on f3. And here we can see why bishop on d3 is actually important, because if it was on e2, for example, then black could play something like e4, attacking the knight, and the white position would have been kind of unpleasant. So black plays bishop d6, developing the bishop, and they're ready to castle. White plays knight c3, attacking the center and developing the piece. f5, very aggressive move by Vincent Keimer, basically saying to his opponent, I'm ready to fight, let's go. f5 is very aggressive, very good. Knight takes d5, c takes d5, and the computer says that this position is equal, and that despite the point that white has an extra pawn. So black has all the activity in this position. The computer says it's equal, but honestly, it's very easy to play for black here, and visually it just seems like black are better. So white plays b4. Very interesting move. Not something that a regular player would find in this position. The threat was e4. That's a fork on the knight and on the bishop. So that was a threat. And b4 is like counterattack. It attacks the black knight on a5. Also, if you take the pawn on b4, then the pawn on e5 becomes unprotected. And white really have to take one of those pawns because the black center is just too strong at this point. So b4 is interesting. Knight goes back to c6. Bishop b5, very strong move, pinning the knight. And here, usually in this type of positions, bishop d7 is normal move, but Vincent goes bishop b7, so the pin remains. But bishop b7 is kind of unusual, but makes sense in this particular position because this diagonal is very important in the game. And it will become very important, especially at the end of the game. We're going to take a look at that. Bishop b2, developing the bishop on a long diagonal. Very normal move. Castle, another normal move. Now the knight becomes unpinned. The rook is participating in the potential attack on the white king. And the black position just looks better. Bishop takes c6. Bishop takes c6. That's an exchange. And here we can see that there are two pieces pointing on pawn on e5, the knight and the bishop. But it does look like you cannot take it, because if you take it, eventually it's going to be a pin here, and it just doesn't look like a good move. The Indian grandmaster makes this move. Knight takes e5. He's not afraid of anything. Heimer immediately pins that knight. The knight has no moves. The knight is under attack by two pieces, only one piece, the bishop protecting it. So f4, pretty much the only move. You need to protect the knight. On d4. And black plays a very strong move, d4. The purpose of this move is twofold. First of all, the bishop from b2 is not protecting the knight anymore. And also it opens the other bishop, the black bishop that's standing on c6. That diagonal, as we discussed earlier, becomes very important in this game. Those two bishops are strong, and eventually they will decide this game. Castle, which is normal. You're going unpin the knight. You're keeping the king safe for now. And let's just take a quick look. If bishop takes d4 in this particular position, then already the pin would make a difference, because in this particular position you can sacrifice a rook on e5, f takes e, and queen h4 check with a very, very dangerous attack, and black are gonna win this position, especially on grandmaster level. So castle was a good move. Black takes on e5 with the bishop, f takes e, and here you don't take the pawn on e5 because the pawns are not so important in this position. Initiative is very important, and you need to keep the pressure going for the black. So queen b6. Sorry, that's the move that shouldn't be made, but and actually Keimer does this move, so I'm actually very surprised, because I was expecting something like queen h4, queen b6, but Keimer takes the pawn on e5, c4. Indian player really doesn't have much to play here. He needs to create some kind of counter chances, and he's creating counter chances on a queen side of the board. So he is creating a pass pawn. Queen h4. Now it's queen h4. The move is obviously getting the queen closer to the king, and eventually it will make all the difference. White plays b5, attacking the bishop. Bishop goes back to b7. Rook f2, potentially protecting pawn on g2. Sorry, wrong error. From the attacks from the bishop, and then maybe the rook will somehow get to this file, g file, and will be attacking point g2. So rook f2 is a good prophylactic move, but all the initiative is with black pieces right now. Doubling the rook on e8, queen f1, going into a defensive shell, protecting once again a very weak, potentially very weak pawn on g2. Rook e6. Computer didn't like this move, but you know, as a person, you kind of agree with this move. It makes total sense. You want the rook to go to either g6 or h6 and start attacking the white king. White goes about their own plan, creating a pass pawn. c5, also c6. If they will be allowed to play c6, then the bishop from b7 will be cut off from the game, which is another purpose of the move c5. Therefore, the German grandmaster immediately moves the bishop on e4 to make sure that there is no c6 attacking the bishop. White plays queen c4, pinning the rook, so the rook cannot so easily go to the g6 or h6 squares where it was supposed to go. d3. The pawn was under attack, so timer basically protects the pawn. But he opens up that bishop, that diagonal, which is not ideal, but I guess this pawn on d4 was even more important. And here goes rook takes f5, which is not the move you immediately see when you look at this position. And after rook takes f5, white becomes much better. Now you might ask, why can't you just take the rook by the bishop? But unfortunately, your queen is under attack on h4. So the bishop is pinned, and that's what the Indian grandmaster is using, the pin, taking the pawn on f5. Very nice move. Nice, easy tactics. Queen g4. That's basically protecting the queen, because now you can take the rook. Now you can take the rook with the next move, with the bishop or with the queen, and you're protecting your pieces. So the rook is under attack now. That's why the rook goes back on f2. The other purpose of this move was even more important. Not only the rook was under attack, but the checkmate on g2 was threatening. So the move that protects the rook and protects the checkmate is rook f2, pretty much the only move in this position. White is still better. White is still better. They have two extra pawns. And that's why they're better. But the position is dangerous. Position is dangerous. You can easily make a mistake here playing white. h5. Another piece is trying to get into attack of the queen. Possibly h4, h3 is the idea. White plays h3 themselves, a move that's considered a mistake. The big mistake, but still a mistake, because the black squares become a little weak. There is no black square bishop in this position, but still queen g3, and you can see that, and that's what German player played, and you can see that the queen is very comfortable in this g3 square. All the threats potentially still exist with the checkmate. So h3 wasn't an ideal move here from the Indian grandmaster. He plays c6. Basically, his idea is, okay, I'm kind of protected. On the king side, I'm gonna move my pawn and possibly queen it at some point on c8. But black are quicker. King h7, that's a move to unpin the rook. Now the rook can move wherever it wants. Queen c5, a very subtle little move. And you can notice that the pawn on h5 is under attack. And that's an important pawn to attack. Black plays according to their plan. Another piece is attacking g2. Now 3 attackers on pawn g2. It's becoming very dangerous. Here, normally you would expect queen takes h5, right? With a check, and the game would continue. But all of a sudden, Leon Mendonça plays rook c1. Rook c1 makes absolutely no sense to me, and I'm not sure why it was even played. But the worst news is that this move loses position on the spot. Queen takes h3. Queen takes h3. Obviously, the pawn is pinned, so that's why you can take on h3. But that's not the most important thing here. Not only it protects the pawn on h5 from capture, but as one can see, there is no defense from the checkmate. There is no defense from the checkmate. 3 pieces are attacked on g2, and no matter where white goes, let's say they their plan of c7, they're just getting checkmate. Check and checkmate. So that's why after Keimer took on h3, Leon Mendonça understands that he is lost in this position, and he resigned. So very interesting game. Again, unusual opening, because normally not played on a grandmaster level. And why it's not played? Because objectively, white is worse in this opening. So interesting choice by Mendonça. And he was better at some point, but at the end it didn't work out. The young German has 1 out of 1 after the first game. Let's take a look at the game between current world champion and Gukesh Demaraju, and he was Anish Giri. This is actually the first tournament in which current world champion participated. This is his first game, official game, after he became a world champion. Gukesh is playing white, Anish Giri is playing black, and Gukesh starts with knight f3, knight f6, g3, d5, bishop goes to g2, c5. That's basic King's Indian variation. Castle, knight c6, developing a knight, d4, attacking the center, e6, kind of a standard positioning of the pawns, f7, e6, d5 in those type of positions. c4, immediately attacking the center from Gukesh, asking the questions to Anish, whether he wants to keep the tension in the middle or he wants to start exchanging pawns. And Anish says, I'm gonna take on c4. I'm gonna start exchanging. Queen a4 is another standard move, pinning the knight and attacking the pawn on c4, and the pawn on c4 really cannot be protected by black in this position. Therefore, they go bishop d7 and threatening knight takes d4. Obviously, the queen goes away from this potential attack. And no, I'm sorry. First, Gukesh took on c5. D takes c5. And as we can see, the knight doesn't have really any dangerous jumps for black. So no matter where he jumps, the queen will just go away. So d takes c5. The move I personally don't like simply because anytime you exchange a pawn in this particular case, and the opponent can develop his piece by capturing yours. c5, you develop the bishop and you take your pawn. Usually that's not a good exchange, but okay, world champion, obviously he knows better. Bishop takes c5 played by Anish. Queen takes c4, the pawn that was unprotected. The bishop is under attack, so bishop goes back to e7. White develop the knight on c3, castle, e4, getting the pawn in the center and starting to controlling the center of the board. Rook takes c8, again potentially threatening the queen, so the queen goes back to e2. Bishop takes c5, putting the bishop on a more aggressive position, but white immediately takes advantage of that move and put the bishop on g5, pinning the knight to the queen. So h6, and here interesting things start happening. On h6, white, world champion, plays bishop h4. Well, you can definitely see that after the move g5, attacking the bishop has no moves. So obviously, Gukesh didn't blunder a bishop. He knew g5 was coming. So that's a very specific idea here. So he knew that the bishop would be caught. And obviously, he knew that g5 is coming. He knew that he would sacrifice the knight for 2 pawns. Bishop takes g5. So white are playing without a piece. Without a piece for 2 pawns. And that's a material advantage to black. But obviously the king is open. And black have to be really careful on how to defend here. Anish plays e5. Very good positional move. First of all, white was threatening e5 themselves and attacking the knight. The knight cannot move because you will take the queen. So that was a real threat. e5 protects from this threat and also opening the bishop. So bishop becomes more active. Good move by Anish. Queen d2. Bishop e7. The bishop goes back, so there is no pin anymore. The knight can move on the next. Bishop h6. This move, you might say, attacking the rook on f8, but that's not the most important thing here. The most important thing, there is a checkmate in 2 moves. Queen g5 check, queen g7 checkmate. So again, rook goes back, check, kings go no matter where, queen g7 checkmate. So therefore, the rook has to be lost, but it's not the end of the world. King h7, that's the move that Anish has to make in order to protect himself from a checkmate. And Now, if you play queen g5 attacking the checkmate, there is rook g8, and the move rook g8, which solves all black problems in this position. So king h7, white takes the rook, bishop takes f8, and f4. Anytime you want to attack an opposing king which is open, you need to open files. So you need to open the f file for the rook. So f4 seems like a definitely a logical move to make in this particular position. Anytime you're defending and anytime you are up a piece, which black is in this position, they actually have two pieces for a rook, so it's +1 in terms of pawns. So they have a little material advantage. Anytime you have that, you want to exchange pieces, especially queens, because queen is obviously the most piece to attack your king. White obviously doesn't want to do it. Put the knight on an active square on d5. And black goes knight b4. And that moves again, trying to exchange as many pieces as possible. The less pieces white have, the less strands their attack would have against the black king. So after knight b4, white plays takes the pawn on e5, fe. Logical move, opens the file for the rook. The knight is under attack, so the knight has to go somewhere, goes to an active square on g4, attacking the pawn on e5. Rook d1, another logical move, protecting one more time the knight on d5, also activating your knight. And also we can see some tactical things here going on, because right now already white are threatening with the move knight f6 check. And the reason why this is dangerous, because move after the check, you take the queen on d8. You have two attackers, queen and rook, attacking this queen. So knight f6 is a threat. Nishgiri obviously sees it, the king to h8, because now there is no check if knight goes on f6. White plays king h1. Not sure why this particular move was played. I'm guessing white didn't want, in some variations, bishop going to c5 with a check. But in any case, king h1 doesn't sound like a really good move, and Anish immediately uses an opportunity to activate the rook. Great move, attacking the queen, and also putting the rook on the second row, which is always a good thing if you are playing black. The rook on the second row is a very dangerous piece, and actually you will see more of that rook in this game later on. Queen have to escape the attack, queen f4, which makes sense. It goes closer to the opposing king. Black takes the knight on d5. Strong knight, so obviously it had to be taken. And here, normally you would say that you would take the knight back, but in this particular case, and the world champion decides to just go back with the queen on f3. And right now in this position, black had really a nice tactical move here. Rook takes g2. And the reason that works, because you're going to give up your rook for the bishop, but the knight will go to e3. And there would be too many arrows. After e3, it would be attacking three pieces of white, two rooks and a queen. So that move was the best in this particular position. But black then played queen b6, which also makes sense because now you basically have some threats in this position, like rook f2, for example. So white takes the knight on d5, and rook f2. Rook f2, that's the move that Geary, I'm sure, was planning to make after after the capture of the knight. And the reason this move is better than, let's say, knight takes f2, knight f2 check, is because in this particular position you can just take the knight with the rook here, and after queen takes f2, nothing really threatening white position here, and they will just take the bishop on e6, and we'll have a totally winning position. So rook f2 is much stronger, and now you can't really take already with the rook, because the knight would take your rook on f2, and there would be a fork, and you're gonna, as white, you're gonna lose the rook on d1 as well. Therefore, queen c3, removing the queen from danger, and bishop b4, attacking the queen, which wasn't the best move in this position, but on the other hand, it doesn't lose anything either. So black pieces are still very active, and at least visually it seems like their position is better. But the black king remains very weak, not protected by any pawns, and at the end of the day, that would when Anish played bishop b4, I don't think he saw a pretty brilliant move, queen c1, and that move immediately equalizes the game, because right now the bishop on e6 under attack, so you have to protect it. It goes to f5. And here white has a very nice square for its queen on g5. So that's how it's played by Gukesh. Queen g5. Position is pretty crazy, I'll be honest with you. A lot of things going on. Very difficult to calculate. And look at the clock. Anish has 1 minute to go in the game. Gukesh has 34 seconds to go. And the clock made the whole difference in this game, because grandmasters on that level, when they are so short on time, they start making mistakes. And black goes back with the bishop on f8, with possible ideas of maybe attacking the white queen from the other side. Queen h4, check. Sounds like a reasonable move. And the bishop goes to h6. And now white goes to e1 with the rook. I'm not sure exactly the reason of this move, but I think it's all has to do with 34 seconds left on the clock, and you have to move. And the only one reason I see for this move, then at some point you would be able to take the rook on f2, and when the knight takes it with a check, the rook on d1 is not under attack anymore. Black takes the pawn on b2, which is very reasonable. Now you have two pieces, heavy pieces on the second row, attacking bishop on g2, and black makes a very unusual mistake, really bad move, h3 under a time pressure. Gukesh basically lost the game in one move. Because Geary had to find the move bishop e4. And he did find it. And he did find that move bishop e4, and looks like the game is over because the bishop is under attack. If you take the bishop with the bishop, then you know there are a lot of things going on here, but basically, I'm sorry, the easiest checkmate is like this. Queen on h2 checkmate. If you take the bishop with the rook on e4, then same thing. Checkmate. So looks like white is lost. They found the only move to continue. Rook takes f2, so at least there is no checkmate right away. Knight takes f2 check. King goes away on g1. And here, most important part of the game, Giri had to find a move knight g4. Not an easy move to find. Knight g4 was winning the game. He had 41 seconds, and unfortunately he didn't. Unfortunately for him and his fans, he didn't find this move because that's basically the end of the game. If, let's say, you take the bishop, then you get checkmated in two moves on square h2. If you take the bishop with the rook, then you have to find a nice checkmate starting with queen b6 and queen b1. So it's a good idea to know how to checkmate in these positions. Taking the bishop here. So that's something that was there for the black. Queen, again, knight g4 was the winning move, but Anish unfortunately plays queen b6. Queen b6, which visually makes sense. Kind of attacking the king as soon as the knight moves away, and protecting the bishop on h6, by the way. But Gukesh is a world champion, so he immediately spots queen f6, which exchanges the queens. Black's attack is over without a queen. And then after exchanging of the bishops, knight has to go away because it was under attack, attacking the rook. The problem here is not material, because bishop and knight for a rook is okay. But the pawn at d5 is going straight to queen, and nothing is gonna stop it. So white plays, gives a check, and just moves the pawn forward. Knight c5 stops the pawn from going forward, but after rook e5 attacking the knight and a couple of more moves, black just resigns. Black resigns because the knight is under attack, and let's say takes the pawn here, d7. The pawn promotes, so you have to take it, and this particular position on a grandmaster level with the rook against the bishop, 3 pawns against 3 pawns, is easily winnable, and therefore Anish resigned in a game where he had every opportunity to win. Every opportunity to win. One more game we're gonna take a look today, and that game was also very, very interesting. And that game was between two Indian grandmasters. Pantala Harikrishna played with white. He's not as known as his opponent, actually. His opponent is Arjun Erigasi, and he might be top 5 player in the world right now, with a rating of 2801. very, very strong and young Indian grandmaster. So let's take a look at this game. White e4, c5, CC line defense, knight f3, very basic, d6, knight c3, knight c6, all basic moves, controlling the center with the move d4. Basically, we have to take cd, knight takes d4, and here black plays knight f6, bishop e2, regular developing moves, both players developing g6. G6 is a dragon variation, that is very popular, maybe not these days, but like 20 years ago, that was the most popular Sicilian variation. The idea is that that bishop becoming a monster on this, on this diagonal. And another interesting detail about this variation is that white castles long, black castle short, and anytime we have castles in different directions, it means that the white are going to be attacking, the arrows going to be attacking with the pawns on the queen side, on the king side of the board, and the black are going to be attacking on the queen side of the board. So very aggressive opening, very interesting. The castle plays a very general move in this type of positions, d5, opening the center right away, asking questions to white what they're gonna do with the pawn on e4, what they're gonna do with the knight on d4. So a lot of things happening already, and that's only move 13. And actually, I'm sorry, this is even not there. This is 9. And already so much activity on the board. In this position, white plays knight bishop f3, which is, you know, obviously a move, not something that normally is played, but protecting the pawn on e4, which is the basic idea, right? With the two pieces here, because there were two attacks. And by this move, Hare Krishna saying that I would like to still have pressure on this center. I don't want exchanges right away. Black plays takes on e4 themselves, and in this particular position, white takes on c6, which is a good move in this type of positions. Now, what's interesting is in this type of position that you cannot take the knight, because you're gonna lose the rook, because white has two attackers on queen d8 and only one defender. So you cannot take the knight, your queen is under attack, so you cannot take the bishop either. So queen c7. In this particular position, white has two pieces under attack, the knight and the bishop. And it's an important move that white can make in this position, as they're losing one of those pieces anyway. Knight takes e7. Why not take a pawn? An extra pawn with a check. So queen takes e7, and now the bishop can go back to e2. So what do we have? We have equal material, and we have very, very open and interesting position, with white plans to attack on the king side, and the black bishop is the most important piece in this position, I would say, because probably the strongest piece in this particular variation. Knight g4, another standard move. Why it's an important move? Because black really wants to exchange this white bishop. Black squared white bishop. because black squared white bishop is the only piece in white position, then can some counterpart with this monster piece on g7, the bishop on g7. So you really, as a black, you really want to exchange this particular squared bishop. The white squared bishop is not as important for white, and therefore bishop takes g4. Bishop takes g4, and queen d6, which kind of releases the pressure, I would say, from white, because the position was becoming a little dangerous for white. So exchanging the queens simplifies the game, and black expectedly refused exchanging the queens. Queen e8, rook d2, because the rook was under attack, right? So just one point of interest here. The rook was under attack here, and kind of natural for some people move to remove the rook from the attack, to move the rook from the attack, I'm sorry, to e1 loses the game on the spot, because after rook a d8, attacking the queen has no moves. Queen has no moves. So that's why in this position, by the move queen d6, white basically protected the rook in such a way that, because the queen is under attacks, and if the queen takes the queen on d6, then the rook will take on d6, and you're not going to lose it. So now after queen e8, now rook has to go to move from the bishop attacking. Rook d2. Black plays rook c8, which looks like a very natural move. Now you have two pieces attacking. Computer preferred taking this knight right away. So you take the knight, play something like queen a4, very active. The pawns here are broken, the king is open, and that was preferable. But I guess the black really valued this bishop on g7 more than bad pawn structure by white, so they played rook c8. White immediately goes to d4 with the bishop. Natural move, because this knight was under attack. Rook d8 is a very clear move, clever move in this position, attacking the queen. And nothing seems like is going to happen here. I was expecting some natural move, like queen c5, protecting the bishop, protecting the queen. And all of a sudden, white takes the rook on d8. Takes the rook on d8. Very unexpectedly for me, but obviously even computer considered this a absolutely fantastic, great move. And what happens here is, so the queen takes the rook. Black takes the queen on d8, and it seems like black is winning, but obviously next move is bishop takes g7, and the tactics works because you cannot take this bishop with the king, because the queen is under attack. And because the queen is under attack, you have to protect your main piece first. So the queen goes to e8. Now you take the rook on f8, and let's take a look here. So what do we have here? We have this bishop is going to be taken. So we have two rooks and a knight against the queen and the bishop. And so knight and bishop are about the same. So two rooks against the queen. Two rooks against the queen, considered better for two rooks. Now, depending on the level of the play, of course, I would say somewhere under 1500, much easier to play with the queen. But anything above 1800 or so, And if you know how to maneuver your rooks and protect them, the two rooks are normally better than the queen. So therefore, in this particular case, 3 is a good move because otherwise you would just lose the pawn here. Um, White takes fe, and you need to take the bishop, so the king take the bishop. The reason for move e3, then at least now this pawn is weak and the queen is already attacking. So white is a little better because, again, two rooks is a little better than the queen. Rook e1 defending the pawn, queen e5, centralizing the queen, attacking h2. I'm not sure that you want to take an h2, but the queen on e5 is a very good position. G3 protecting the pawn on h2, bishop e6, a3. Prophylactical move for future, just in case the king would have to escape somewhere. Black plays king g7, rook d4, and now the next sequence of moves pretty boring. White is just gonna improve their position very, very gradually, carefully, and so after a series of moves, connecting the rooks, always important when you have two rooks to make sure that they're all connected, protected. E4, again, slowly putting the pieces forward, controlling the center. Last two moves by black show you that black have no plan here. They have no way to improve their position. They're just waiting. They're just waiting. White, again, gradually improving their position. The knight goes to the center board, very active position. And now the idea of white is to exchange the knight for the bishop. Bishop is a little better. It's an open position. The bishop is a little better. So white wants to exchange it. If knight and bishop goes off the board, the white's life becomes even easier in this position. So white is attacking the bishop. Bishop goes back. Then some prophylactic move again. Black are trying to find some counterplay on the king side. Queen takes h4, but again, everything is protected. This pawn is protected by the rook. This pawn is protected. Knight is active and protected. And white continue to attack the bishop. The bishop continue to go back and forth. And again, after a number of moves, now here, e5 is attacking the queen on a little tactic that if you take the pawn with the queen, knight takes f7, fork, and black loses the queen. Now e5, so the queen goes away, fine, attacking the bishop again. Bishop goes back, check. King goes to g5. If king went to g7, very unpleasant check from e8, and then it's gonna be very unpleasant position for the king, for the black king there. So the king goes, instead the king goes to g5, to the middle of the board, but it's not going to be easy for black in this position either, with the king on g5 going back, king b2, and after a series of moves, we get to this position, again attacking the bishop. Again, the bishop goes away, check on g8, position becoming very, very dangerous for black, king g8, another check moving back. And h4, again, when the king is in danger, you want to open as many files as possible. White are not worried about the fact that this pawn can be taken by two pieces, but the thing is that you cannot take this pawn, because if you take it with the queen, we have a fork again. Knight is a very dangerous piece, forking. And if you take with the pawn here, then after this check, the only move is king g7, again fork. So you see, geometry of chess, very nice. You cannot take the pawn on h4 at all. So therefore black plays g4, which is pretty much the only move because the pawn on g5 was under attack. Still check on g8. Again, you cannot go here because after knight f6 you have a checkmate. I'm sorry, a fork, and the queen is lost. Therefore, king g6. And finally, white are able to fork the queen and the bishop and exchange this bishop that they wanted to do for the last 20 moves or so. And after, again, a series of moves, h5, the final move of the position, very nicely done by Hare Krishna. After h5, what happens is that the bishop is under attack, so obviously you need to do something about it. So you can either go back or you can take the pawn, otherwise you lose the bishop. And if you go back, then you lose after knight g4 check, and let's say king g7 check from the rook, you lose the queen. And if you take the pawn here, same thing, knight takes g4, and let's say king g7 again, same idea. And if you take here, the two rooks easily winning this, especially that you're threatening a checkmate, right? So in this position, after h5, one of the best players in the world, Arjuna Rigasi, resigned, and that was a very, very nicely played game by Hare Krishna. So we have 3 decided games today. I think all 3 of them very, very interesting and enjoyable. And I hope you enjoyed the video. And we'll be here tomorrow for day 2. And hopefully there will be more interesting games to. Thank you for watching.